This is a humble battery. In a world moving beyond fossil fuels, these energy cells will power most things.
If you use a mobile phone, if you have a laptop, the battery is everywhere in our life.
And when it comes to battery manufacturing, one country is the undisputed leader.
Battery production in China has been really growing very fast because it has a strong demand.
But now, major economies are worried about China's pole position.
The United States has come to realize the degree of dependence on a single country.
Korea and Japan, they are trying to create a market for themselves in the electric sector.
Who will win the battle for batteries?
We're kind of at a fork in the road about whether we're going to see two worlds of batteries, and it's going to be unfortunate.
My name is Julio Martinez. I am a salesperson here at CarMax. For example, this vehicle here, the 2021 Model 3 Tesla, it's priced at just under $32,000. When you compare that to a lot of the gas-powered vehicles here, this is actually a great, it's a bargain almost.
Electric vehicles are energizing the American car market. According to the International Energy Agency, sales of EVs grew 55% in 2022. And despite the economic slowdown this year, the EV market is still expected to expand 35% in 2023.
It certainly doesn't make an economical sense to try to get the best bang for your buck through a standard gas-powered vehicle. The electric vehicles are going to be better overall.
Driving the popularity of EVs are a slew of subsidies rolled out by the US government. The latest is the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, signed into law last year.
The Inflation Reduction Act seeks to really link the decarbonization agenda of the Biden administration to the desire to revitalize the US economy. And in order to meet the net zero by 2050, and also Paris targets under the 2030 commitment.
Climate change is driving a global energy transition. And key to all that is this, the battery.
If you use a mobile phone, if you have a laptop, that's how the battery, like lithium battery, started to be used in the market in the 1990s. And today, the battery has been in the electric vehicle and also in the new field like large-scale stationary energy storage. So basically, the battery everywhere in our life.
Whether as a store for energy generated by renewables like wind and solar, or as the driving force of electric vehicles, batteries are at the heart of our post-fossil fuel future. But now, there could be a battle brewing over batteries. Because currently, one country dominates the global battery supply chain: China. China produces most of the battery cells for EVs, claiming about 75% of market share. 6 of the 10 largest battery manufacturers are in China, and it also extracts 60% of the rare earths used to make batteries.
Battery production in China has been really growing very fast because it has a strong demand. And so the EV automobile market in China is enormous, and you have a whole huge growth potential.
So how did China come to have such a commanding lead in battery production? It's tied to the explosion of a parallel industry, electric vehicles.
I think that the Chinese government identified earlier than most that this was a strategic industry, and it put the incentives in place. China didn't really have that mature petrol engine market in the same way to compete with the idea of electric vehicles, and that really opened things up for much more rapid expansion. They are making some of the best, cost-effective, most technologically advanced electric vehicles around.
Beijing identified electric vehicles as a key pillar of growth back in 2015. Generous subsidies, tax breaks, and other incentives gave birth to a slew of successful homegrown EV brands. Among the first to make the move to EVs were Chinese ride-hailing companies. Slowly, EVs gained wider acceptance and popularity among the Chinese public.
The first generation or second generation of the EV car, maybe technology was not great, or battery was not that perfect. But new EV car is very efficient, very reliable.
There could be as many as 300 EV manufacturers in China, and one company stands as king of the hill. BYD, or Build Your Dreams, is the largest EV manufacturer in the world. The Warren Buffett-backed company started by making phone batteries in 1995. In 2003, it applied its cutting-edge battery knowledge into cars.
我们不断地在新能源技术方向上的坚持，我们不断地在新能源车市场和行业发展当中的坚持，所以应该说我们这个包括以中国市场为例吧，像目前中国市场已经成为了这个全球最大的新能源车市场。
In 2022, BYD beat Tesla to become the world's leading electric car seller.
接下来为大家讲解的这款是我们的海洋网的宋 Plus 冠军车型，那么也是我们国内销量最火爆的一款比亚迪的 DMI 混动车型啊。那么这边呢就可以看到我们的一款海豹全新 E3.0 平台的一款纯电轿跑的一个车型。加入比亚迪是2年的一个工作时间，我也见证了比亚迪从几万台到10几万台一家。
BYD is not only winning car sales, it's become the world's second largest electric vehicle battery producer. According to SNE Research, just 2 Chinese companies, BYD and Contemporary Amperex Technology, or CATL, control 52% of the global battery market. And China's dominance also stretches to the supply of critical minerals. According to the IEA, China processes more than half of the world's lithium, along with many other key materials used for making batteries.
It will be extremely difficult for the US and Europe and others to really stop being reliant on Chinese minerals. So in my view, the global EV battery supply chains without China would not be really a reality.
But Chinese dominance has made other major economies nervous. And in this context, we return to the Inflation Reduction Act. Under the IRA, American EV buyers can claim up to $7,500 in tax credits. But these come with conditions. By 2025, qualifying EVs cannot contain minerals sourced from a foreign country of concern. And by 2029, the EV batteries must be assembled or manufactured in the United States. These restrictions are seen as chipping away at China's stranglehold.
The massive and highly influential Inflation Reduction Act, which is this huge amount of money and regulation and incentive to essentially spur on the green revolution in the American economy, it's not a place where Chinese companies are welcome. and so they would have to probably sell into the US market without many of the incentives that could come with that.
The United States has come to realize the degree of dependence on a single country, and in the context of recent some of the economic coercion cases that the United States has seen, those have all sort of added up and really are getting a really bipartisan focus in Washington, D.C. on the degree of the U.S. dependence on China.
US-China rivalry has heated up in recent years, spilling into trade. Last year, President Biden's CHIPS Act prohibited the sales of high-end chips and related technology to China. China retaliated by placing export curbs on some rare earth minerals. Batteries could become the next area of superpower competition.
There's no doubt that the definition of what is a strategic sector for the United States is broadening, and the levers that the US is putting in place to limit Chinese access to those strategic sectors is growing.
A battle for batteries could reverberate around the world, starting with the countries that extract a mineral known as white gold. Underneath the red earth of Australia's vast outback lies something known as white gold, lithium, a key material in battery making. And Australia happens to have the world's fourth largest lithium reserve. In 2021, its mines provided half the world's supply of the metal.
Australia has abundant critical minerals that go into making key clean energy technologies like electric vehicles and their batteries. So there's a big focus on developing Australia's critical minerals industry. This is seen as a key point of economic growth and diversification, and there's obviously huge demand for critical minerals in a lot of other countries.
Deep in rural Western Australia lies the Pilgangoora project, one of the world's largest hard rock lithium deposits. It's owned by Pilbara Minerals. From this hard rock, spodumene, a type of lithium ore, is extracted. The bulk of spodumene is then shipped off to China to be further processed into lithium hydroxide for use in lithium-based batteries. Nearly 90% of China's raw lithium imports are from Australia.
China has a big usage, and China also cultivated a big processing capacity to meet the demand of this big market.
But the tide is turning. The last few years have seen a deterioration of China-Australia relations. In 2020, China imposed trade restrictions on Australian agricultural products, sanctions that are still in place. This has prompted Australia to re-examine its reliance on the Chinese market.
Well, it's a security of supply vulnerability that will be familiar to people who remember the supply chain disruptions we saw post-COVID or post the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It doesn't make sense from that security supply perspective to have so much activity concentrated in one country.
With the competition over batteries heating up, Australia has found a willing buyer to fill the Chinese void: the USA.
The United States is starting to invest heavily, diplomatically, invest heavily in resource-rich countries around the world. And some of them are other sort of industrialized nations such as Canada and Australia.
Australia's got the stuff. It's got the lithium, it's got the rare earths, and it is looking to create the production and refining around that because it can now see the huge potential of being one of those friend-shored suppliers to the China global battery and EV market.
What is happening in Australia gives us a good idea of the global picture. The roots of the battery war begin at the base of the supply chain, the scramble for raw materials, and the major battery producers are scooping up what they can. In 2022, the Biden administration proposed an overseas mining fund to support foreign projects. China, meanwhile, has invested in prospecting for lithium ore across Central Asia and Africa. In the meantime, Beijing cannot afford to alienate Canberra yet.
During the economic coercion situation that happened between China and Australia, the one thing they never touched was Australian iron ore, because Australia is far and away the biggest producer and exporter of iron ore to China, and there's no ready-made solutions. In the lithium side as well, as I mentioned, Australia has an even stronger position. I think there's been some normalisation of the Australia-China relationship since the Albanese government came to power, which is last year. So there is definitely some sense of interdependence there, and it goes on both sides of the relationship.
With competition driving demand, opportunity beckons for resource-rich countries. Enter Indonesia. The archipelago is the world's largest source of nickel, accounting for nearly half of global production.
Nickel is an essential mineral that goes into the battery technologies, which are going to drive the electric vehicle revolution. Over the next 30 years, versus the 30-year just past, we can see a route to a world where nickel demand could quadruple.
But Indonesia isn't content with just exporting raw materials. It wants to move up the value chain. So in 2014, the country banned the export of nickel ore. This was relaxed in 2017, but a full ban returned in January of 2020. In that time, Indonesia shored up its own refining and processing capabilities.
The nickel ban has been around for close to a decade, and what that has done is, through various measures, essentially try to ensure that more of that processing happens in Indonesia, with, of course, the wanted side effect of developing industry there. So it's created jobs there, it has put factories there, it has brought FDI into the country.
Kalau kita bicara nikel ya, saat ini Indonesia mungkin adalah satu-satunya negara yang sangat amat berhasil. Kita berbicara hilirisasi nikel, yaitu downstream, belum sampai 10 tahun. Sampai saat ini, menurut data kita ya, per bulan September kemarin, itu sudah banyak pabrik pengolahan nikel yang berdiri di Indonesia.
Some of the factories were built with foreign capital and know-how. The Morowali Industrial Park in central Sulawesi is one of the biggest nickel-based industrial areas in the country. It's backed by both the Chinese and Indonesian governments.
China is definitely the first mover in this industry, given Indonesia needs for developing its downstream industry, and also Indonesia needs to develop more technological capabilities, and China is the actor or the partner that stand ready to support Indonesia in this area.
And this strategy has paid off. Indonesia's exports of processed nickel reached an estimated $30 billion in 2022, a staggering jump from just $1 billion in 2015.
Dalam hal ini kembali saya bilang thanks to China. Kalau Cina nggak melakukan jor-joran gede-gedean di sini, nggak ada negara yang akan ngobar kita. Jadi nggak ada negara yang cemburu kalau kita bilang ya. Ya dengan keberhasilan ini mudah-mudahan apa yang sudah terjadi kita menjadi pelajaran untuk bagaimana kita melakukan negosiasi dan mengundang investasi negara lain untuk masuk di Indonesia.
But there is another side to the skyrocketing demand for battery components. In the rush to exploit raw materials, environment and human costs get neglected. Off the southeast coast of Sulawesi lies Wawoni. The island, roughly the size of Singapore, is dotted with sleepy fishing and farming villages. But recently, nickel mines have disrupted Wawoni's tranquility.
Tambang nikel di Pulau Wawoni, PT GKP ini sangat-sangat mempengaruhi kehidupan kami, kehidupan saya. Karena sejak masuknya perusahaan tambang ini di Pulau Wawoni, dia sudah merusak sumber mata air kami.
Ismail is a farmer on the island. He plants cashew nuts and nutmeg and fishes for additional income. He's agreed to speak to us on the condition of anonymity.
Sumber mata air ini merupakan kebutuhan pokok kami. Sehingga ketika mata air kami itu sudah mulai rusak, mulai bercampur lumpur, ya saya harus mengambil air di tempat yang cukup jauh dari tempat tinggal saya, dari rumah saya, dan itu saya memikul dan saya ojek.
The mines are operated by mining company PT Gema Kreasi Perdana, which owns about 1,800 hectares of land concessions on the island. These are licenses awarded by the government for mining.
Di Wawoni itu pertambangan nikel dilakukan sejak tahun 2014 ya. Nah, iup keluar itu sebenarnya memang mulai dari tahun 2014 di Wawoni itu, tapi untuk produksinya, pengolahannya itu nanti dilakukan itu tahun 2017. 2017, 2018 itu baru mulai masif terjadi di sana itu. Kalau musim hujan, mereka banjir. Kemudian kalau musim kemarau, ornikelnya itu, debu-debu ornikel itu kemana-mana berterbangan.
Ini pohon merica ini. Nah ini terlihat jelas sekali ini. Ini sudah ditutupi debu ini. Jadi ini punya potensi lagi untuk gagal panen lagi. Ini pohon cengkeh. Ini bukan lagi gagal panen ini, tapi ini sudah siap mau mati ini. Karena ini sudah parah sekali.
Away from Ismail's farm, the once pristine coastline has also been ruined by mining activity.
Sebelum ada tambang, laut ini jernih sekali. Dan di sini tempat anak-anak itu bermain ketika air pasang. Tetapi setelah perusahaan tambang PT GKP itu mulai masuk dan melakukan eksploitasi nikel di Pulau Wawoni, karang-karang ini, bahkan air sungai ini mulai berwarna coklat.
Saat ini yang terjadi di Wawoni itu, beberapa kasus kami dapatkan dari masyarakat, mereka sudah mulai mendapatkan kulit mereka itu gatal. Nah ini bisa saja disebabkan dari sumber mata air itu yang sudah tercemar, yang mereka gunakan sehari-hari untuk minum, untuk masak, untuk mandi itu sudah tercemar. Dan ini bisa saja menjadi penyebab utama.
Then there is also the issue of land rights. In parts of rural Indonesia, like Wawoni, land ownership is often murky.
Land dispute is always a big problem in the mining area because even though the government give the concession or permit for the mining companies to operate, but in many cases this area or the concession area actually have a certain community.
Since mining began, villagers have held demonstrations, riots, and in some cases, armed confrontations to assert their land rights.
Sampai saat ini juga belum ada kepastian yang jelas bagaimana hak-hak mereka yang sudah direbut paksa oleh perusahaan pertambangan nikel ini.
Perusahaan juga nggak sembarang, Mas. Artinya ada masyarakat yang memang mengklaim lahan mereka, padahal milik negara. Baru kita harus membayar ganti rugi. Tapi ada juga perusahaan yang nakal. Ada milik lahan masyarakat, mungkin merasa punya power, kemudian mereka mengambil alih. Jangan mengeneralisir, karena faktor-faktor isu penting di lapangan juga harus diperhatikan.
The story of Wawani reflects what's happening elsewhere around the globe. In the rush to feed the exponentially growing demand for minerals, sustainability is not always a priority.
We can see from that side that Indonesia may gain a short-term gain, and eventually Indonesia will lose because of the cost that the country has to pay in terms of the environmental cost and also the social cost.
At the upper end of the value chain, the battery battle is also heating up. Who will make the breakthroughs in battery tech? Over the past 13 years, Cheng Qian has been researching new battery tech. He started his career working on the world's first mass-market electric vehicle.
After my PhD graduation, I joined an NEC work specifically for the Nissan Leaf. I think that's the first electric vehicle that is in real mass production.
Today, he helms the international business unit at Goshen High-Tech, an energy solutions company founded in 2006 in China. It has 25,000 employees and 8 research centers globally. Goshen is one of the earliest companies in China to develop lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. Including Goshen, China has 6 of the world's top 10 EV battery makers, producing about 75% of all electric vehicle battery cells.
Chinese government has very actively support to development for the electric vehicle industry, and because of that, there's a lot of the companies, not only the battery companies, but also some like materials companies that are all rising up.
Apart from raw materials like lithium, the battle for batteries is also taking place in the technological space. With policies and subsidies driving growth in this sector, China is far ahead of the competition. According to global data, as of mid-2023, China has 14,000 patents related to EV powertrains. In a distant second is the United States, with 4,000.
The Chinese are making some of the best, cost-effective, most technologically advanced electric vehicles around. This is not simply a cheap, poor quality usurper product that's knocking the petrol engine off its perch in Europe and the EU. This is cutting-edge stuff.
And now the race is on to build a better and cheaper battery.
So there are, several factors that determine how good a battery is. So one of them is how fast it recharges, right? If it's a rechargeable batteries. How long it lasts, how many times you can actually recharge the battery and the battery is still functional, because eventually, if you charge and recharge too many times, the battery dies. From time to time, we hear about an electric car that explodes because of something. So safety, environment, and recyclability became very important issues now. And so to get that, you have to change technology.
So you can see from now on, there will be a lot of innovations of the lithium batteries. But for the current lithium batteries, and you can see that 10 years ago, for the lithium batteries, like LFP is only 90 watt per kilo. Currently, for the LFP, we go 200 watt per kilo. Even with the same chemistries, if we normal optimizing for the cell design, for the chemistries, for electrolyte, for the manufacture processes, we can increase a lot, several times of the performance.
Currently, for EVs, two technologies are the most widely used: lithium, iron and phosphate, or LFP, and lithium, nickel, cobalt and manganese, NCM. The race is on to develop the next generation of battery tech.
So this is another part of the battery production. We are here in an environment that is extremely dry. So it's drier than the Sahara Desert. It's only 1% humidity here.
And this is what's currently occupying Professor Antonio Castro Neto and his team at the National University of Singapore's Centre for Advanced 2D Materials.
So this is a new type of ceramic membrane containing niobium, right? So this is used inside of the battery to essentially help ions to move through the battery. We already proved that a graphene niobium battery can survive without any change for more than 10,000 cycles. So what does that mean? That means that we can discharge this battery 10,000 times and the battery is still working. 10,000 cycles means 30 years.
So these batteries can last 10 times longer than current lithium ones. However, niobium, an element needed for niobium graphene batteries, are about as rare as lithium. But there is another battery prototype that uses something far more abundant: sodium.
The traditional ion used for batteries is lithium. Sodium is the next ion in the periodic table. Anyone can capture seawater and extract salt. And from salt you extract sodium. And from sodium you can make batteries.
Countries or companies that make battery breakthroughs will have a distinct advantage. Patent protections will allow them to carve out a space in the market, protecting them from competition.
It's first move advantage, time in the marketplace, degree of genuine competition within a gilded cage, if you like.
Japan and South Korea are also exponents in the battle over batteries. These two countries used to be the technological powerhouses in Asia. Now, they're playing catch-up to China. South Korea wants to invest $15 billion in the sector by 2030, while Japan is considering tax incentives for battery research.
Japan and Korea were already the second and third biggest producers, so obviously some way behind China, but they were already, essentially a big part of the market, and so have the capability there. So, expanding capability is easier than starting it up from scratch. And so with these incentives, that does create a good environment for them to increase their production.
What China did is that they push their industrial sector very strongly towards electrification. And Japan and Korea and other countries, not just them, have been slow in doing that, right? But of course, these are countries which have very high level of technological development. They are trying to create a market for themselves in the electric sector.
And then there are those using a different tact to rein in Chinese dominance. The EU is investigating if Chinese subsidies, which drove EV development, are unfair. This could lead to curbs on Chinese EV imports.
Si ces subventions ne sont pas conformes aux règles de l'Organisation mondiale du commerce, il faut que l'Europe puisse riposter. Pour être compétitif, il faut innover, il faut simplifier nos règles, mais il faut aussi savoir défendre nos intérêts. Et l'Europe doit montrer qu'elle est déterminée à défendre ses intérêts économiques, à défendre ses intérêts industriels.
China has hit back at the EU, accusing it of protectionism.
We are entering a phase where a lot more countries are adopting protectionist types of policies, right? And with things like the Inflation Reduction Act and with sort of copycat acts by the EU or by other countries, with other production incentives that might come from Japan or Korea as they develop their own capability, you'll probably see a more spread out market. But in terms of dominance, you're looking towards the end of this decade, China will probably still be pretty dominant in batteries.
The battle over batteries is brewing. But as the major economies duke it out, what opportunities could be found for the little guys? Countless motorcycles moving along the streets is a common sight in Jakarta. Indonesia is the world's fourth largest market for these two-wheelers, with 125 million on its roads. However, only about 35,000 are electric. But the government plans to change that. It has introduced tax subsidies and incentives to boost electric vehicle adoption in the country. Startup Ion Mobility is hoping to cash in. It has built its first electric motorbike called the Ion Mobius, targeting consumers in Indonesia.
Our initial market is in Indonesia, and we've taken the past 3 years since mid of 2020. By end of the year, we would be ready to start mass production. I expect the first batch of deliveries to happen in Q1 next year.
As the major powers battle over batteries, this has created opportunities for smaller players like Ion.
I think any big moves by big ships and big players often leave behind a lot of room for smaller players like ourselves to innovate. And I see opportunities everywhere. With this new world order, previously, as a small company, no China player, no China supplier would care about us unless we had big orders. But in a new world order where they see the opportunities versus the threats, I feel that we get taken more seriously by our suppliers and opportunities for co-creation increase.
There are also opportunities to be found upstream of the supply chain. As battery producers vie for scarce resources like lithium, an alternative industry has sprouted up: battery recycling.
This is our lithium recycling process line. From lithium batteries that we collected, the ferrous and non-ferrous metal are separated that we can able to obtain the black mass.
This black mass is basically a crushed battery. At Secure Waste Management, a Singapore-based company, old batteries are first drained completely of stored energy, dismantled, and then shredded.
Currently, our process capacity is 3,600 tons, mostly EVs batteries. The EV batteries currently we process is primarily from North America and Europe, a very small portion from our Asia and Singapore.
Secure Waste sends the battery leftovers to partners like NEU Battery Materials, who extract the white gold contained within this black mass.
So the first part of our process is to put black mass into our proprietary solution, and its job is to react with the lithium. This part of the process is where lithium gets extracted. Lithium actually moves across our membrane and react with water to form lithium hydroxide. So after lithium gets extracted, we actually collect them in this tank here. The last part of our process is to concentrate the lithium hydroxide. We dry it and actually form the product right here.
According to McKinsey, The battery recycling industry could be worth $95 billion by 2040. At the moment, competition over batteries is creating more opportunities than obstacles.
The idea isn't so much to replace or displace China, which I think is impossible, but the idea is to have more participants in the pool of suppliers, whether it's the upstream, minerals extraction or the processing of these minerals, and then all the way downstream into EVs.
I don't think that we are in a war sort of situation. It's not as, say, strategic as semiconductors, for example. There's so much of the pie because we are going to need so many batteries to power the EV demand that I think that several parties can win.
I think China welcomes competition, fair competition, and China, encourage, we follow the WTO rules. I don't see a problem of, having a healthy competition. I mean, the biggest beneficiary is the consumers. I don't see any wrong with that.
So the battle for batteries hasn't become a full-scale trade war just yet. But with mounting geopolitical tensions, this could change. And some countries want to hedge their bets by building alternative supply chains for batteries.
The Koreans and the Japanese have come to a very strong conclusion that the components that go into batteries and electric vehicles are strategic, which is why, on the one hand, they are very keen to create a separate supply chain to the Chinese one coming out of Indonesia, because both the Koreans and the Japanese have been on the receiving end of Chinese sanctions in the past around strategic minerals. They don't want to be beholden to the Indonesians. They certainly don't want to be beholden to the Chinese.
The Koreans and Japanese, as strategic partners of the United States, could benefit should trade relations deteriorate between the two superpowers. Countries like Indonesia, without a free trade agreement with the US, could be left out in the cold.
I think the potential impact is that Indonesia will lose out the access to US market, given that this Inflation Reduction Act requires a certain percentage of the production of EV batteries. Without any agreement with the US to accept Indonesia EV products, then it will be difficult for Indonesia to expand its EV export to other countries.
Meanwhile, to get around the IRA and other potential tariffs, Chinese battery manufacturer Gotion has a plan. It's investing billions into setting up a factory on US soil. By manufacturing batteries directly in the United States, they can avoid trade barriers.
We are asking for the support of the government, and the support means welcome Chinese companies. For the Chinese companies, you need to think not only manufacture the battery cell there, but you need to consider every materials that need to be fulfill the RA requirements. And basically, you need to make your materials yourself, ourselves, or you need to bring your partners to USA.
But even this move is risky. In the chips war, the Biden administration prohibited US investments in Chinese equities involved in sensitive technologies. Should the mood over batteries turn sour, American partners of Chinese firms could face similar sanctions.
It's a little hard to say, how some of the Chinese investments into the US EV ecosystem can continue on. There has been, a lot of discussion within Washington, D.C. as to the level of exposure that is appropriate.
There's a strong case made in the United States around the vulnerability of having an open market in high-end chips, which will be exploited by the Chinese for nefarious aims to undermine the United States. If that sentiment extends to more workaday items like things on 4 wheels, I think it's going to be really unfortunate for consumers all around the world.
The battle over batteries is at a critical point. There is one dominant player, China, with a tight grip on much of the battery supply chain. A grip it has no wish to relinquish.
China has the biggest market. China is the largest producer in the world. China has the best upstream, downstream value chain, supply chain. China has the best talent. You know, every year they have 12 million college graduates, many of them engineering background. I don't see why China will not be the best innovator and producer for this kind of category, because the market is there, the demand is there, the technology is there, the logistic transport is there, and then the trading system is there.
As the world confronts the looming spectre of climate change, whether the battery battlefield becomes one of contest or cooperation could affect us all.
We're kind of at a fork in the road about whether we're going to see 2 worlds of batteries and electric vehicles, a Chinese one and a non-Chinese one. It's going to be unfortunate for technological innovation, and it's going to be unfortunate for our efforts to combat the climate disaster.
The world needs a lot more EVs on the road if any countries or many countries are going to meet their commitments, right, towards net zero or towards other types of climate commitments. And we are very far away from that. So what could be the worst case scenario if China does restrict, say, some of the minerals that it has access to? That process will slow down. That could be a negative outcome really for many countries and for any kind of climate targets that we have.